long time ago, probably in '93, to Peter Gabriel's Secret World Tour. He designed the stage so that one side was about the male and the other side was about the female, and one side was square and the other stage was circular. And I always thought that was fascinating, and he sort of decided which songs would be played, whether they were female song or male song, in their feel on either of those stages. And I never forgot that iconography. And that really did kind of influence a little bit the fundamental nature of each of these characters. The other thing was that just the design, we wanted to be able to play in both spectrums of robotics, really high-end technology and really low technology. So Wally I always call a tractor, Eve I always call sort of like a Porsche. It's like she's the highest, most expensive, no expense spared kind of project that the By and Large Corporation could use to make a probe droid. It's so advanced we don't even understand how she can float and how these appendages can sort of magnetically sort of be close to one another and things can separate, but it feels like it has a logic behind it. Wally is much more nuts and bolts, and you can kind of get how he works from afar. And we just have found a lot of fun discoveries. We found, putting the sort of dump truck back to him made him feel like he had a backpack like a little kid. But first and foremost, he had to compact trash into a cube. Like, no matter what we did, he had to do that. I was so enamored by Luxo and the power that short film still had after almost 20 years that I thought, well, could you carry a whole film expression-wise with something that simple like a cone layout? But I realized that I really would limit it too much. For a short film, yes. For a feature film, probably no. And I was at a Red Sox A's game. I think it was November of 2003. It might even have been a playoff game. I remember my editor on Nemo, David Salter, asked him to hand me his binoculars so I could watch the game, and then I sort of started noticing the binoculars, and I looked down at them. And it just all came back to me as a kid playing with my dad's binoculars, and how you could sort of bend them up and down and make them sad, then happy, and it just hit me. I thought, that's exactly it. That's how you could also get the swivel up and down that you get from Luxo, but then from a straight-on view, you could get other subtleties of their acting to get more emotion out of it. And it didn't need anything else. It didn't need a mouth, didn't need a nose, didn't anything to sort of represent expression and emotion in the face of any sort. And I loved the fact that it could stay that removed from a real face, and that you could, again, see it as mechanics first. And that was it. Once I saw that, I said, okay, I stick that on top of this trash compacting box, and that's the character. And I didn't want to use the same function to sell other robots. I wanted that to be unique to Wally. I mean, it almost gives him a Buster Keaton quality. He has this stone face, sad eyes quality that I really think is part of his appeal. I mean, he was a master. You can't improve upon him. And so I wanted Eve, on the other end of it, to have a different way to express herself. And I thought, well, since we can do high technology, I loved the idea of having this almost high-end, light bright kind of face where the eyes could almost animate. You could squash and stretch them. They can move around and give you expression in a different way, but still limited, really limited. Again, no mouth, no nose, nothing else. And they, again, complemented each other for being two ends of the spectrum. And all of that came out of this little team of guys before I ever got the entire crew on. So I really lucked out that a lot of the key things to this movie, the tone, the feel of it, the design of these two characters, really kind of got nailed in a year that really nobody would have gotten mad at me if all I did was spend money and go travel around and try to get inspired for the next film that they do. And thank God I did, because the hardest part of this film was figuring out the rest of the story, figuring out how to make the rest of this movie work. I sometimes have to give lectures or talks about, the other films that we've done at Pixar at schools or things like that. And one of the lessons I always say is know your ending. Know the punchline to your joke. And then design your joke around the punchline. It's much easier to figure out a story that way. Or else you're really going to be spinning your wheels trying to go front to back. And sure enough, I broke my own rule. And it wasn't because that was what I intended to do. Again, it just came around to the fact that the whole first act just sort of dropped into my lap when I wasn't supposed to be writing on it, when I was supposed to be working on another film. And, when those inspirations and ideas come to you, you just grab them when you can. But it really did set me up for a really tough journey. Jim Reardon and his story crew, and Ralph Eggleston and his art department, they had to come up with a lot of the storytelling through their artwork and through all the elements that are in this film. They had to bear a lot of the storytelling as well. it was hard. They'll admit we probably went through 3 or 4 features worth of storytelling and some very different left turns, which I think you'll probably see on other parts of this disc, of what were we really trying to say. I mean, very early on, as we tackled it, the big idea of Wally inadvertently, for just falling in love with a character and wanting to pursue love and gain it, would accidentally, in a byproduct kind of way, bring humanity back to itself, bring humanity back to Earth. And that sort of led me to sort of Noah's Ark kind of feel of I don't know, I just kept picturing sort of getting that olive branch from the dove and everybody knowing it's okay, it's time to go back, and then landing back on the planet and things start all over again. So I kind of knew that that was where I wanted to end up, and so I did kind of eventually get my punchline at the end of the joke, but still wasn't clear. I hadn't really given much thought at all as to what was the state of humanity, why were they out there, why were they not coming back, all this backstory that I really had to work hard to come around to. It was not fun. But I feel very, very happy with the final version of the story that we came around to. I always sort of equate story development to an archaeological dig, in that you kind of know that the dinosaur you want to dig up and where it is. You pick a piece on the ground, you start digging, and you bring up bones, and you start trying to piece together this dinosaur or the story that you're trying to find. But you just don't have much say about which bones you're going to get and what bones they are, and you're not given a map to know exactly what parts of the body they go to. And so if you've designed, out of the bones you've pulled up out of the ground, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then at the last minute you get a bone you weren't looking for, and you realize that actually your tail bones were the neck bones and that it's a Stegosaurus, it's not a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Are you going to have the guts at the last minute to shift everything around and admit that this is really the story you should be telling, that this is the dinosaur that you have, or are you just going to force it to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex, even though really you know now, and now that it's almost too late, that it's a Stegosaurus? And I think a lot of movies suffer from that. They crack their problems, or they figure something out too late, and nobody has the guts or maybe even the ability to change things. And I'm very, very lucky that I work for a place that encourages last-minute ideas, encourages 11th hour changes, because this certainly fit that. We found out we had a very different dinosaur in the whole arc of this story, and shifted it all around probably again and again through the first 2 years, and then in 2007 we did the bulk of what you see on the screen here. And all through that, our first act pretty much stayed the same. Our first act was always what it was, and that's an odd way to make a movie, but it got us to where we are. One geeky factoid about Hello Dolly, the movie, is that there was never a shot that really focused solely on their hands holding. So we were able to go into the film elements and get a nice clear image of one of the shots and just zoom in a hair tighter so that you looked a little bit more at their hands than anything else. That allowed us to make that be a real special moment for Wally to focus in on. That was all. That was the only sort of little adjustment that we had to do. I'm sure that there are probably a handful of Hello Dolly aficionados out there, and you might have already caught that. Eve is actually voiced by a woman who works here, Alyssa Knight, who does a lot of scratch for us. And we knew we didn't want Eve to have a actual direct voice that you could connect to a human being, but we wanted it to have the inflections that a human being would give a voice. So the source of it is from a lot of scratch we had Alyssa do it. So sometimes we would have her say actual words, or just sort of a closed mouth vocal, and then Ben Berg would affect it, give it all the cool sort of flanging sounds and glisten effects that you associate with her, and found that sort of special identity for her.